Passive and active voice. Your 10th grade English teacher's favorite thing to mark you down for, but who remembers any of that stuff anyway? So today we're going to be answering 3 basic questions. What is the difference between active and passive voice? When should you use passive voice? And is passive voice the grave moral sin that church doctrine, grammar doctrine, says it is? Basically, every English sentence has 2 major building blocks, a subject and a main verb. Sometimes you want that subject to be doing the action on something, and in that case you need a direct object. When these 3 building blocks are in this order, subject, main verb, and direct object, your sentence is in the active voice. The sentence, "Nobody asked for this dumb video," is in the active voice because the subject, nobody, is doing the action on the object, this dumb video. Passive voice is when you switch the subject and the object, so that the thing the person was doing the action on is now the subject. Okay, now I've confused myself. In the sentence, "This dumb video was asked for by nobody," nobody is still the agent of the action because it's the person or thing doing the action. But grammatically, it's no longer the subject of the sentence. The recipient of the action, this dumb video, is now the subject of the sentence, grammatically. So what's the big deal, right? Who gives a Shakespearean sonnet whether the agent is the object or the subject or whatever? Well, a lot of people agree that the active voice sounds more direct or more emphatic than passive voice, and that's why they think active voice is better. For example, "The Globetrotters defeated the Generals in last week's game" has less chill than "the Generals were defeated in last week's game." One reason for this chill disparity is that the second sentence drops the agent of the action altogether. This is actually a common feature of the passive voice. Because the agent is no longer the subject of the sentence, it's no longer necessary to complete the sentence. Here's a trick to recognize passive voice. If you add the phrase "by zombies" to the end of the sentence, and it changes the meaning so that zombies are now the ones doing the action, your sentence is passive AF. Take the sentence, "This trick was shamelessly stolen from a professor on the internet." If you change it to, "This trick was shamelessly stolen from a professor on the internet by zombies," it sounds like it was a bunch of shambling brain eaters who stole the trick from that talented educator. And that's not what happened. We stole the trick. Because passive voice can eliminate the agent, it is sometimes favored in academic or scientific writing. The authors of a medical paper, for instance, might want to avoid using the first person to describe their research activities in order to give their methods or their results center stage. But when it's important to know the agent, you have to be careful not to absolve them of responsibility by obscuring their role in the action altogether. Imagine a headline that reads, "Dozens tear-gassed in protests at..." You might find yourself wanting to ask the journalists, who tear-gassed them? And why is the perpetrator of that brutality not named in the headline? But that's just what they don't want you to know. We've gone over how passive voice affects the meaning of a sentence, and how that can be exploited in irresponsible ways. But there are plenty of other rhetorical reasons to use the passive voice that don't have to do with obscuring clarity or being a tool of the ruling class. In his book, Style, Lessons in Clarity and Grace, which is surprisingly a grammar textbook and not a Victorian etiquette manual, Joseph Williams identifies several reasons that you might want to use passive voice in your writing. One example he gives is writing from a specific point of view. Take our earlier example about the game between the Globetrotters and the Generals. If you're a Globetrotters fan, you'd probably write this sentence in the active voice, because in your mind, the important subject of the sentence is the Globetrotters. But if you were a Generals fan, shout out, you'd probably write it in the passive voice, because to you, the Generals are the subject of the sentence. So the long and short of it is that active and passive voice are 2 strategies you can use to make your writing more effective. To overgeneralize, you should prefer the active voice in non-scientific writing in order to make your writing more direct and not absolve agents of any responsibility. But sometimes, if you have a good reason for not including the agent, or if you want to write from your favorite team, the General's point of view, shout out, passive voice is a perfectly fine choice to make. And that English teacher who went through your research paper on Karl Marx and circled every instance of passive voice and gave you a C-, even though you spent 5 weeks on that research paper and had what you now know are perfectly legitimate reasons for using the passive voice, yeah, that was whack.